I'm good.
Yeah, I don't know if that want to be successful or not. I feel like, actually, I feel like if you were to talk to any woman at the bar, you have a much greater chance than if you didn't talk to the woman at the bar.
This is what you do. You go, hello.
Just
Is that it? You just give her the eyes a little.
You go, hello.
Remember Joey from Friends? How you doing? You guys are too young for that.
With some creepy eyes. All right, we're recording. Welcome to the Men Podcast, everybody. Joe Roeder, host here at Red's Fly Shop. We're upstairs in the office today. It's kind of after hours, so we're having a beer, celebrating a really cool day. This will be probably our first installment of Tuesday's Tippets now that we're kind of fishing again in February. So hopefully we can keep the Tuesday's Tippets program rolling, and we got a bunch for you today. So I'd like to welcome to the podcast. We got a couple of special guests here. I feel fortunate to have gotten out fishing today. We've got Jason Randall. Jason,
hey, I'm happy to be here. I just loved sharing your river, absorbing your local river knowledge and some of the techniques that work here. And it was a spectacular day, Joe.
Well, in addition to being a farmer, what the heck do you do with yourself in your spare time?
Well, I guess I was a kid that grew up that couldn't figure out what he wanted to do. So my background, I've lived all my adult life on a farm. I'm still blessed to live up in some great trout waters in Wisconsin as well, in the driftless streams. And educationally, I have went to school and got a bachelor's degree in ethology and biology. I went on to veterinary school after that. I did my postgraduate training in trout at Madison, and I just have fallen in love with fishing and fish and animals in general.
Your postgraduate training. I like that.
Postgraduate, postgraduate
training in trout.
I did. I went to Madison and studied for their fish health and medicine program, and kind of really had a real focus on trout specifically. But once you go through that, the only jobs I found that were available would be in the hatchery business, and I guess I just wanted to be outdoors and on the river more.
Now, what brought you out here?
I came out with Nick Conklin, who's going to say something here too, I think pretty soon. But we came out for the Bellevue show, and we just thought, well, let's tack on a few extra days and have some fun.
Yeah, so the first time I met you was at the Bellevue Fly Fishing show this last weekend. And yeah, when you mentioned that you had an extra day to come out and fish, and did you know you were going to be just coaching and teaching us all day?
Oh, I was learning too. I mean, every time you're on the river, especially a new river, it gives you another opportunity to learn something too. So this sport is for life learners, and we're all learning.
Well, Nick, at risk of encouraging Jason to hijack the podcast here.
No,
that's quite the lead. And I definitely don't have that background, that education.
We can't let that happen.
All right, Nick, how'd you wind up here? How'd you wind up at TFO? What are you doing?
Yep. So I'm the product category manager at TFO. So I handle product design, sales, work with our sales reps, our national advisors like Jason, and also run shows and events. So if you've been by a TFO booth, you've seen me pacing around or sweeping the floor and fixing routes, things like that. So a little bit of everything on the fly side, and had probably a unique start, I would say. Grew up in Michigan and was in the outdoor journalism world, right? And getting out of college, that was a tough prospect to really earn a living and survive.
Being a writer,
right? And I was lucky enough, I did some writing for the Drake, for Field and Stream, and you get as a college kid, 2 or 3 checks a year, right? That's good beer money. You could survive.
So you're from Michigan?
Yep, grew up in Michigan.
Do you know Steve Rinella?
I do. Another proud Michigan. We have a deep history from Michigan of writers and people Absolutely. In the outdoor world, so I like to try to lump myself in with them.
Do you know Ted Nugent?
I know of him, not personally. I think our political leanings might be a little bit different.
Nick is too humble too. Nick is a fly fishing. He's a fly fishing author as well, and his new book. He's got another book coming out. His new book is selling like hotcakes, and it's a really great book. And I think Nick, you should say something about that.
Yep. I didn't know you wrote a book until Jason Harwood was asking you about your book today, and I'm like, hell, I thought Nick just tested rods and designed rods.
You thought he was just another pretty face.
I thought he was just an engineer that goes fishing.
Well, I'll take the pretty face comment. I won't take the engineer comment. So I'm not nearly that intelligent or that skilled, and I have zero engineering background. But yeah, published a book through Stackpole this December. Finally came out about fishing pressured Western waters, stuff you guys deal with all the time. But just kind of felt there was a little bit of a disconnect and a lot of frustration. Right? There's only going to be more people fishing. There's more people on the water, and what we do to our rivers and lakes, right, is horrible. So I hate to see people get frustrated, but there's ways to kind of tweak what you're doing and maybe take a step above the average or the occasional angler and really improve your skills and improve your enjoyment. Whether you're catching fish or not, there's ways to just improve that mental approach and the result.
Did you have like an aha moment when you're like, I'm going to write a book specifically about fishing pressured waters?
Absolutely. So I co-authored it with my brother, my best friend, Colin Zillick. We were standing on a bridge over the Madison River probably 2 summers ago, 50 drift boats going by. Everyone's kind of fishing the same way. You could tell everyone's kind of having the same level of success. And we just, again, the aha moment was there's got to be a better way to do this, right? There's got to be something we can share. He's worked in the fishing tackle industry for 20 plus years as well.
What does he do?
So he owns a company called Sawgrass Fishing Rods based in Dallas. But previously we were colleagues at TFO and we fish a ton together. But again, watching a lot of people do the same thing and have the same level of success and not really having that light bulb moment of, well, if I did this a little bit differently, or if I watched somebody that was successful, maybe I'll pick something up.
That's like the definition of mediocrity,
right?
Like, like it's almost the definition of insanity, but like doing the same thing over and over again with mediocre results.
Exactly. And we have a lot of guide friends. It's like you see how people show up and their lack of preparation, whether it's just getting tackle together, spending time practicing and developing a good cast, all those little preparation things. And man, I hate to see these guys show up and, mix for a long day for you guys, right? Because you spend half your day getting them to effectively cast a fly rod, tie on flies, do all those little things that you really want them to show up with that skill set built in. So again, that aha moment. Or you watch a boat go down the river and they're 100 yards, 200 yards down the river and they're still tying on flies or figuring out how to cast it,
Or hung around the anchor.
Yeah. All those little things. And all right, if we could just share some of what we learned and just watching other people fish, right? And we're kind of a freakish culture. We're so fixated on what everyone else is wearing, what rod they're casting, what they're doing, but we don't really try to understand why they're doing it, right? Why do you work like this pair of waders or these boots or this rod, right? It's all the visual thing, but not really taking that next step.
Well, those are all like distractionary conversations. Like most discussions on tackle are completely distractionary from like what the real nugget is. The real nugget is like, where do I stand? How do I approach the water? Where are the trout living? Like those are the conversations that should dominate like all fly fishing discussion and preparation. Like, waders are waders. You want a really good set, spend $1,000. You fish a little bit, you don't really care, buy $200 waders, etc. The same could be said for rods or lines or whatever. But like, yeah, I didn't know that about you. That's really fascinating because like my whole odyssey into Euro nymphing, tightline nymphing, contact nymphing, Jason can define all those things for us here on the podcast, which I think would be really helpful, actually. Spanish nymphing, French nymphing, blah, blah, blah. Some people just call it nymphing, right? Or modern nymphing, whatever. But like my whole odyssey into this style of fishing was exclusively I was determined to help the do-it-yourself angler. The guided boat anglers are going to do fine. If you want to do a couple of guided trips a year, wonderful. You're going to have great success. We're going to make it real easy for you. We're going to flow 10 miles a river. We're going to untangle your flies and so on. But the angler that's out that has a handful of Saturdays a year that wants to go have success on pressured guide waters, some of the most prolific streams, most of the prolific streams in the West are all fairly well guided, right? We have this public land model that's wonderful for everyone. It's especially wonderful for the outfitter that wants to go run a handful of trips. Like the guide pressure is going to be something you have to realize that the best and most effective pressure on the river is not coming from DIY wade fishermen. It is coming from guides. And how do we set ourselves up in a position to not just compete with the guides, but to actually find leverage points where we can do better than what the guided boats are doing on foot. That was my whole, like, once you heard my story yesterday, right, in the shop about like, learning about, I've said it on the podcast before about just being humiliated because I didn't know how to tightline nymph and go, man, you literally standing in one spot outfished all of our guided boats today when it comes to just catch count, like one spot. And I'm like, more people need to know about this that want to fish on foot and have that, that pedestrian experience of fishing on foot, standing in the water, doing it themselves, having skin in the game, that level of satisfaction that comes from generating your own success.
We had that same experience today at that last spot we fished, where we had 3 or 4 different anglers pick out probably, we thought maybe a total of 8 or 9 fish in 20 minutes.
With 2 flies.
Yeah.
Like I fished a little different fly behind Jensen and then Hayden, and then I fished a little different pattern, kind of coming up behind them. But
A little sneaky, I picked your pocket comment there.
no, man, that wasn't. You're misreading me, because I was up at the head of the run when you were up above, and I was like, Hayden's like, how are you doing? I'm like, dude, Jensen's down here sticking fish, and I'm sucking hind tip. I'm like, I am not doing any good right here. I was trying a couple of different things, which you were gracious enough to teach us today, which we'll unpack. So I was kind of in a learning, position, but. Yeah, let's and Ethan, we got Ethan Gillespie on the podcast. Ethan, introduce yourself. Why the heck not?
Yeah, I'm Ethan. I've been working at the shop here for, I don't know, maybe 8 months or so now, 7 months, somewhere in there.
2 days a week for 8 months.
Yeah, roughly 3 weeks worth of work. But, yeah, first day ever trying tightline nymphing or Euro nymphing or whatever we were doing today, and I really enjoyed it. So it was definitely a good day. Caught my first trout doing that technique. So yeah, it was a great day.
Now you've been out with your old man when he's been Euro nymphing.
Yeah. So he's been doing it for probably 4 or 5 years, and I'd go out with him just indicator bobber with a nymph underneath, and I swear he'd catch like 8 to 1. And we're fishing the same run, but I can't fish so far up in a riffle or whatever because I'm using an indicator, and he'd just be yarding them out right in front of me. And I'm sitting there like, man, I caught 1 fish that hour and he caught 12 of what's going on. But yeah, so I was glad to try it today, and definitely think I'll be fishing more like that in the future.
That's what you're talking about with the indicator is like, it doesn't scale well. So like when you're fishing in the pool and you work your way up into the riffle, you're either moving your indicator or you're having to depending on how your rig's set up. If you're moving your indicator, you're probably not taking full advantage of the system, because now you've got thick butt section underwater, which is never a good drift.
Yeah.
Or you're trying to run that indicator down into your tippet, which is an exercise in absolute frustration because the indicator's slipping around, you're tangling up, etc. And I think you guys know this, but yeah, Ethan's dad was like my guide mentor, man. Your dad took me under his wing.
That's so cool.
Dude, Ethan's dad showed me the stuff. I got to get your dad on one of these podcasts about sea run cutthroat.
Well, now you're paying it back.
Exactly. I'm trying. And so Ethan was on, and then I got my son Jensen on.
Hi, everybody.
He was lights out today, man.
He's had a little bit more experience, but let's talk to Jensen first. So Jensen, we've been out. I don't know. You've tightline nymphed a lot,
Decent amount, yeah.
and your dad, me, has taught you what I could teach you and what you're willing to absorb. And as far as like getting a little bit of coaching from Jason today versus everything I've taught you, how would you say that balances out? So you've got 100 hours with me, and you had about 90 minutes with Jason. How would you say the value of education balanced out?
I mean, no dig on the old man, but yeah, took some steps forward today with Jason. Yeah.
Well said, man. You know,
struggled
sleeping in your
making-
truck tonight.
Don't forget, he's the one paying for college.
Paying the
so
bills.
You got to say nice things.
Well, he's getting a new drift boat next week, maybe if he keeps his mouth shut.
Maybe.
Oh, we had fun. I loved your enthusiasm. I loved watching you catch those several fish, 3 or 4 fish and about 4 or 5 cats.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was like every time we passed these two, it was either Ethan or Jensen had a fish on. Like, I was like, oh, they've got a fish again.
Yeah, I'll summarize kind of what the day looked like for the podcast listeners. So Jason Randall is like, I think I described Jason after one conversation with you. I sent a text message to our whole guide group chat. We have a WhatsApp guide group. And I was like, this guy's a savage with the tightline rod. I was like,
wow.
I go, hey, if you can get out. And I could tell in one conversation with you, I was like, this guy's a savage with the tightline rod. I go, you guys really need to come out because he's willing to coach us a little bit and fish with us. And I got a few takers. I texted Ethan last night. Hayden was working the shop today, but we peeled you out.
Mm-hmm.
And then I texted my Jensen's my older son. I texted Jensen midday. I'm like, dude, we got space. You got to get down here. And then David Tormala from the shop.
Bad
David came with us.
There's got to be a story behind that.
It's like a pretty random nickname.
I like to just throw names at him. I call him Big David, Bad Dave, Young David.
And then Bad David just stuck because he's the quietest, most like gentle guy in the store. He's kind of
just a weapon on the river.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
So, and then we had Chris Waddle, who's been on the podcast before, who's entered kind of the competition realm. You know, he's not employee of ours, guide of ours or anything, but he's really gone head over heels with this style of nymphing. And Jason Harwood, who runs and directs the university. So we had a pile of us in 3 boats.
That was a blast. I and don't forget how much we learned from you guys all day today, too. And, just watching. We watch you guys too. I'm watching you read your water, learning, as you're sharing your information too and your knowledge. And I had a great day too.
Well, yeah. So like it was total of 9 of us, I think. Yeah, 9. Yeah, 9 of us. We had 3. By the time this whole thing ended, we had 9 of us in the boat. And the first thing we did is Jason gave us just a little bit of tutelage, at the ramp. And then we hopped across the river. We put David on a rod. We put Ethan on a rod. And Jason gave us a really great, just tutorial. Some of the way you described it. We'll talk about this more in a second. But like the way you describe zones and your priority in each zone, like zone of the drift, etc., was super helpful. But like for like Jensen, for instance, like, I mean, I'm coaching the best I know, I haven't, been exposed to a lot of anglers that are far more experienced than me, with the exception of like Russell Miller, who I think I've had Russ on the podcast, and you. But like Jensen, how much did it make a difference? Like you had your leader set up, like, you were running, describe the setup you were running, and then describe what it might have been different after we re-rigged you.
Yeah. So I was running just standard floating line with a Rio shorty, 20-foot shorty on it. So just a short section of your nymphing line. And then I was running from the end of that shorty about 4 feet of mono, and then 2 feet of 2X cider, and then about 5 feet of 4X or 5X tippet.
Yeah, so it's pretty basic beginner setup, right?
Yeah.
And then I threw that a couple times. Jason worked with you a little bit. And then after fishing some of the other micro leader stuff that, Jason had and I had, and I was like, we got to rebuild that. And then we ran out a long section of 0X, which is super heavy for a guy like, Jason or Nick. They're going to be like, that's super heavy. But we move a lot of stone flies and jig streamers and things. We cast a lot of heavy stuff. We cast in the wind a lot here. So I ran out a section of 0X, pink butt section, ran out about 20 feet of that. And then we rebuilt your cider a little bit, 2X cider down to 4X cider, a 2-part cider, and then I think 6X fluoro below that. Did you find a big difference in that leader construction?
It was a little bit trickier to handle and cast, but the effective range that you could get good drifts was 25 to 50% more. It's just way less sag in the system and way better connection with your fly.
That was 6X on there?
Yeah, dude. Like,
no, I set the hook like it was 3X. No, broke up.
We didn't tell you that.
No, I was like, man.
Those rods are shock absorbers.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah. So we fished and fished. Jensen jumped in partway through. He got out of college, came down, jumped partway through, and then Jason, talk us through like what you saw in Jensen and improvements that you made to his game in that one slot that you worked with him in and coached him in.
That was a fun spot too. And I think just getting Jensen to energize his cast, get a little more energy in that cast too, because he was only going about maybe 15 or 20 feet initially. And we could just get him to get a little better, a little deeper load into that rod. He brought the flies around and really started with a more effective cast. And I think we probably added 15 feet to your cast just at that point. And then he was very effective at kind of following that descent of those flies and then getting connected to the drift immediately. And then just what he was doing during the drift, I think really got those fish turned on.
And Jensen ended up, how many, you landed 3 in there?
Something like that.
In about 5 casts.
Bam, bam, bam.
Whatever. He knows exactly.
He's humble.
That's
Definitely
such
more
bullshit.
fish than that.
He doesn't want to
Across the
confess.
river, and I look over every time he's got a new one on.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is, cartwheeling.
Yeah. It was fun. It's it's nice to work with a skilled angler, picks up stuff so fast.
Yeah. What about the animation of the fly? Like talk through what was working in that slot, and then Jason, if you could talk about animation of the fly, describe what it is. A lot of users don't know what like animating a fly during the drift would be like, and then what was effective for us today.
Well, I think sometimes we are so focused as a sport on that dead drift. We're just going to be doing the same drift over and over and over again. And if we've tried a few dead drifts through there and they've not taken the fly, then the next thing I think that we should try is to do something different to try to entice that fish, maybe to talk them in. It's a little more salesmanship, I think. And so getting that fly to act like a natural bug, I think, is what we're trying to do. And I think at first when we start animating the flies, we start to be a little bit more overzealous with it. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes we've got to think that, okay, this is a nearly weightless bug that we're trying to imitate, and we've got to get into size appropriate movements of that fly that aren't going to overdo it and make it look artificial to the trout. And Jensen was very good at picking up just a little slightly jigged movement. And when we're jigging, we can't just drop the fly because then it's all slack. And then we lose connectivity and we might miss some strikes that way. But it's just kind of that gentle. A lot of times we'll do this back roll of the rod tip, very subtle, kind of a slower movement. That slow roll will actually start to turn your fly headfirst up into the current from the downstream drift, and it will start to roll up and then go right back down. And it looks like a displaced bug that's been swept up off the surface. And I think that's what we're really trying to animate.
Is that exactly what your old man taught you, Jensen?
Pretty much.
Not at all.
Don't forget he's paid for college.
Yeah. I meant to say yes. Absolutely.
I've been screwing it up.
You and I both had kind of that takeaway of like we were sitting in that slot and you were coaching me a little bit about like because I was, from what Joe I kind of picked up from Joe, I was jigging the hell out of that.
Yeah,
I was like,
we're ripping it through like 3 different water columns.
Yeah,
I mean,
and you are, and I think you're really degrading the drift. But I think Joe was doing something a little faster, and I think we said, Joe, just slow that down a little, be a little softer with it, and it was that same drift. You got that nice fish.
Well, you go ahead, Hayden.
Well, we were sitting there on the walk back to the boats, and you and I both were like, because you said something, you were like, man, it's a lot more subtle than I usually would do it, and you're not trying to make it look like the bug's moving around. It's more that the current is moving the bug around.
That's it right there.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. That's,
Well,
it.
they were
That's
like
perfectly set.
I mean, there were several drifts too where like you'd be dead drifting it, and then when it just started to get downstream of you, you do like a couple of soft jigs, first or second jig, you got to ground.
Like soft chins. Like
Yeah.
I was thinking I was
very
jigging
subtle.
soft,
Yeah.
and you were like, no, man, you're way too crazy with this. It's so subtle.
I mean, the rod tip's only moving like 2 inches.
That's about
Well,
right.
it's just
enough, right?
That's about right. That's
It's
enough.
just a bug, right? Like it's the water moving the bug, not the bug moving itself.
I think that's key.
Yeah.
And I had been, agitating stoneflies, crayfish, and mop flies. I'm learning as best I can. And you described something this morning about back rolling
Mm-hmm.
a jig. And I had this epiphany. I was like, man, it's the water that's moving the bug. The bug itself really has no ability to move itself within the current, the drift. and we're trying to imitate it catching a little cyclone or a little wave or a little current, and it's washing and it's changing and it's opening its hackle and the rubber legs are moving, and we're
Well said. And I think the flies have a lot to do with it too. These flies that have the characteristics to be able to kind of swell and contract with the movement, I think is going to be a more effective bug to imitate that type of movement. When we have real stiff artificial flies, like a Perdigon would be kind of at the opposite end of that spectrum, as maybe that's not a fly that would respond as well to that animation as the flies that we were using today.
Squall about it.
Yeah.
at everybody. Now, Nick, you spent most of your time spay fishing today and just coaching and talking.
Swinging a little 2-handed rod, and I pointed across the table at Hayden just now because it's almost the opposite approach.
Yeah.
Where if I'm swinging right for trout, I'm trying to animate that fly as much as possible and watch him hook into a couple nice fish. Just real subtle, almost like a steelhead swing, right? Not really pushing it, not moving that fly too much. All right, that makes a lot more sense out here. I'm seeing where that would be beneficial. So it was just an interesting, split or dichotomy between the two techniques today where I move in that streamer way too much and just kind of watching him let that fly do its work in the current.
So the spay fishing you guys did today, the dead swing got the strikes?
A subtle finger pulse, just a subtle. I mean, really, it's the same exact. Like, it's kind of funny. I didn't think about this until now. The same exact thing happened where you were like kind of chill your jigs out a little bit. I was taking my index finger and my middle finger, and I was just barely pulsing the line, just a very subtle chug.
That's cool.
And that was what did it on, I think, every take
just
I had
every good take and the fish you hit.
Yeah, subtle.
So out of the fish we caught today, now Ethan landed what at least the fish I saw, the nicest fish of the day. Ethan landed a dandy, and that was your first fish on a true tight line. Like there's a difference. There's a difference between getting into Euro nymphing or tight line nymphing, and you get a fish when the fly's swinging up. You get a fish when you just beat them over the head, or the fish are aggressive. The water was 39 degrees today.
It was,
They weren't aggressive.
I was like,
My leaky waiters let me know. It was cold.
It was, Jason knows exactly how cold it was because he went and did a little swimming.
I have to follow tradition. The last time I was on the Yakima, I did a nose dive and face plant into the water. Came out in front of a Girl Scout camp out and got a standing ovation. Took a bow. So I just had to do a repeat performance today. So
Watching the Olympics, man. You're just trying to show off your swimming skills.
yeah.
The number of fish we put in the net today at 39 degrees, right? And Ethan landed a dandy, and it was super intentional. You were on the feed me spot, stair stepping it down the ledge, right? You cast into. I'll retell it because I was watching pretty close. But yeah, you put the fly in the gravel, kept the sighter high, and then you just literally just measured your way down into the slot. And we had fished that spot with a different fly. And then we put that fly on that Hayden had tied.
Yippee.
The squalla, for listeners, go look at that squalla pheasant tail that Hayden tied on YouTube, because that got most of our fish today. The vast majority of the fish were caught. We just didn't have enough of them. You need to go get to work.
I'm gonna go sweatshop tie a bunch of. I'm gonna go tie 24 of those things after today. You said it worked, and then I was like, oh yeah, I'm sure you're just kind of blowing smoke. And then we went and fished it, and I was like, oh, this fly is actually really producing.
Jensen landed 3 on it. Ethan landed the big fish on it. You landed fish on it.
Smooth broke it off in a fish's face.
Oh yeah, that's right. You broke it off on a fish.
A hard take. Most of the takes that you saw that I had were you're like, I think that was a fish, and then I missed a few, and I finally hooked one. That one was like, wah, wah, wah. I was like, whoa.
So I think a lot of the fish that we got today, I don't know that you would have caught them on just a dead drift.
no.
Most of it, we were animating the fly. The vast majority of it. In Nick or Jason, describe the different ways. First, describe you're not going to animate the fly with a strike indicator on there. Number one, right? You just don't have the control. So just want to lay that out there. It's just not possible. Indicators are slackline drifts. Tight line nymphing is tight lines, and then you have the ability to control what the fly does and it looks like. And I'm realizing I know very little about this. There's a whole there's a lot to learn. Describe one of you guys, like, and you can take turns or whatever, animating the fly and the different types of animation, because we agree as a group, like, being able to animate the fly today generated fish that we would not have caught, like, otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
Yeah, that's true. I think there's several different ways to animate flies as well. We talked about quite a few of them today. Sometimes if you're under tension, you're doing a tension drift, just a simple hand twist retrieve. The act of doing that hand twist retrieve will sometimes just give enough movement to that fly in real subtle situations, especially these cold water situations. I think that retrieve could have worked as well today. And you're going to do that as you get tight to the fly and continue and proceed through the drift. Though that's a very subtle form of animation, even though it's considered a way of retrieving slack. That can sometimes work. A standard jig can work, which is more of an up and down where the fly does not turn headfirst into the current. But a lot of times to imitate what you talked about, that little movement where the current can kind of sweep up the fly, that roll jig, I think, is probably the most effective. And I think that's what we were doing mostly today. And that worked really well. And then with some of these, these really nice, soft flies that have a lot of extraneous materials on them, that little slip at the end where we're slipping line through, just to give that a little bit of a pulsing action, will sometimes, I think, trigger strikes as well.
Yeah, I, having guided a lot, mostly all slackline guiding, there are certain moments in a drift that you can't necessarily put your finger on why they're going to get bit, but they're going to get bit.
Yep.
And so much of that time, like, is when that fly gets released, right? You put a little tension on it and then you release it. And it could be under a hopper dropper, it could be under an indicator, whatever it is. And I discovered this years ago, but like we'll just say a Pat Stone, right? It's the most popular fly in America. It comes in a bunch of sizes and colors, out throughout the West. It's very popular. But like when a Pat Stone has any tension on it whatsoever, the rubber legs are all pinned back against the body. Like it's just pinned back. There is nothing there. And then the moment it gets released, those rubber legs go, whoa, and they'll
flare out.
They flare out. And I want you to talk about that roll jig, because when you explained that this morning, I was just like, holy smokes, like you're roll jigging it so that you create that release. You tension it so that you can release it. You tension it so that you can release it. I had never heard that explained before.
The fly going, bite me, bite me, bite me.
That's perfect. That's exactly what it's doing. It's just maximizing the potential of that fly to look more realistic. And so I think that's what we're trying to do. And I actually want to go back to a word that you said just a few moments ago, that word intentional. And I think that's really, the real benefit of some of the tight line and the loose line Euro nymphing techniques that we do is we're becoming very intentional. We know what we're trying to imitate, and we have the ability with that style of fishing to imitate that. And I like the thought of having intentionality in our fish. I want to catch intentional fish. And I think too oftentimes we put a nymph under a flotation device, a strike indicator, and really are we being intentional in that moment, in that style of fishing? And I think our greatest intentionality becomes I think more evident when we're really having that kind of control over the drift, where we can change things up according to the fish's level of assertiveness in their feeding.
Yeah. You're hoping, not hunting.
That's right. Yeah. And it becomes an intentional process. And I think it appeals to the thoughtful angler, that cerebral angler that really wants to have that type of manipulative control and that influence in the drift. And obviously when we're under a higher degree of tension, as we go from that tension to a little bit looser connection, I think that really does maximize the fly's potential to look lifelike.
Nick, we just named your next book, dude. The Cerebral Angler.
The Cerebral Angler.
Or the intentional angler.
The intention. And you don't have that intention under an indicator or a flotation device, right?
Yeah.
You can't manipulate it. And how many times do you see people hook fish that just by happenstance or accident, right? I mean, they do more harm than good, unfortunately, at times.
Yeah, Nick, I want you to answer this. Like, there's maybe a chapter in a book about this, but like explain to us like when a cerebral angler, we're going to use the shit out of that term.
I like that. I'll have to steal that from you, man.
When the cerebral angler,
it's patented.
Yeah.
explain when the cerebral angler may want to use an indicator versus just, not just, but tightline techniques.
I'd be hard pressed to find an opportunity or a situation where I would use a flotation device these days.
A bobber hater.
And I hate to be, I don't at all mean to be negative or disparaging to people that use them. Yes, because there's a learning curve. There's something valuable to when people are trying to understand how to nymph fish, how to fish pocket water, pools, things like that, where they can come in handy. But I just feel like it at times can do people a disservice, or those that may not be as cerebral or paying enough attention and focused. It might be kind of training wheels to them, where if you just give them a little bit more, right? Like what was shared today amongst all of us, just talking and watching and understanding, where you can kind of speed up that learning curve a little bit. And again, there's a lot of unintentional fish caught under a flotation device. And there's a lot of, I consider active angling versus unactive angling, or inactive angling is probably the better word to say, so it is a word, where you're just kind of watching an indicator float by and you're not really understanding what those flies are doing. And more often than not, people are spending time, and whether they understand it or not, they're pulling flies out of the zone, right? Yes, there's uses. I'm struggling to find a use right now after spending a couple hours with all you guys where, watching all these people catch fish, be productive, whether they're subtle movements or no movements, you're not just yanking your flies out of the zone, right?
Yeah, I think that probably comes with your experience level and your skill set, naturally, because like one thing I've had a hard time with Euro nymphing or tightline nymphing is when you walk into a piece of water. The first piece of water we went to this morning, right here at Red's, we parked the boats, we walked upstream, and then there's this real soft flat that's maybe 18 inches to 2 feet deep. Great edge water, right? Because it's adjacent to a big bucket. The fish that are feeders will probably want to move up in that slow water. And normally still, because I don't have this skill set developed yet, normally I would, walk through that water and go right to the obvious spots or the obvious seams. But Jason, you've been working on some techniques to try to be able to fish with a tight line rig and not have to use an indicator a lot of those soft or more subtle waters.
Yeah, and I think I want to build on a comment that Nick said too, is that I think sometimes we let the river fish our flies instead of taking control of our drift and being more involved in the actual presentation of our flies. And I think there are some techniques like that we're just we're throwing it out there, letting the river do what it will. And I don't think that's always the most effective way to catch fish. So I
feel like there's more feedback, right? I mean, you guys felt when you were touching bottom, felt when you were moving those flies around. I just feel like sometimes a flotation device kills that feedback, and it's hard. And it's hard for everybody. I mean, I still struggle with it too. It's hard to get that feedback if you're close to the zone, if you're close to the bottom, right? If you're ticking the bottom at all, well, I hope my flies are dropping down. I hope I'm close to the bottom, but I feel like it just creates a little issue, right?
And there's a big
desensitizer, right? Or it's
a big disconnect to your flies.
Yeah,
you're not really that well connected to the flies. I think it leads to inaccuracy in strike detection.
If you've got a traditional type of fly line, right? Drags being created and
that's right,
just ripping flies through there. Can you really feel anything? And
right.
I mean, even the argument we have of like in the winter, like a lot of the guides are like, well, you get as long of drifts because we usually, the bobber guys are running a really long drift through the deeper pools. Today we did a little bit of tight lining out of the boat on the way down after we fished all together, which I don't know, this is maybe off topic, but you're able to control on the move the depth. Like if you're nymphing on the go with a bobber or a flotation device, like you're saying, you're at one depth the whole drift, right? Like like you said, you don't know what it's doing down there, and your fly is just starfished out, just cruising down. We were able to like, okay, I see a ledge, drop the fly down the ledge, and then okay, like David, I was yelling at David about a cool move he did. There was a boulder, he lifted the fly up and then dropped it back behind the boulder and let the fly fish behind the boulder. Like you can't really do that as effective with an indicator.
You're limiting your options, and it may be against Jason's sensibilities, but you could drop that sighter and you can manipulate it in a different way, right?
Yeah.
Just maybe not.
Jason's getting mad right
You
now.
might not be able to do it
dropping the cider in.
with a flotation device, right? It's okay to maybe drop the cider and go deep in it.
I didn't know that was like a no-no. Like I was like, just like, all right, here we go.
It is.
And then Jason was like, don't do that. I was like, oh. And then after you said like, well, it's a thicker diameter.
Yeah, against the strongest layer of current there is.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good point, right?
This is the drift.
Yeah.
It's not only thicker, right? Because like when I first started learning how to do this, I thought the cider being multicolored was you wanted it in the water because then you could kind of see where your depth was based on, I dropped it to the pink layer or the green layer or whatever.
No.
And then I learned later on, I'm like, I'm not catching much when my cider's in the water, right? Like I learned the hard way.
There's one other manipulation that we can do that I think would have applied perfectly for that is when you're coming over that boulder or something like that is we'll lift to keep from snagging. And then we call it inverting the cider is we'll stall the progress of the rod and let the flies precede the drift and then lower it. And you're going to drop right into that fish's mouth.
It was pretty cool that like David executed it pretty well.
Yeah.
I said something to him about it. I was like, wow, David.
It was fun to watch. He figured it out and picked up on it.
Yeah, you could see it click.
Yeah, so your setup is scalable from 12 inches of water to 6 feet of water or whatever it is, but you can actually take a boulder and be super intentional about the way you manipulate or drive your fly around that piece of structure.
You're fishing individual pieces of structure rather than a piece of water. Like instead of fishing a run, like, oh, this run's 6 feet deep, let's say. And you're like, all right, I'm going to fish down 6 feet deep the whole way down it. And you don't know what it's doing the whole way down. You're fishing the body of water. You are fishing the individual structure in the body of water.
Very intentionally.
Very intentionally.
Yeah, that's intentional angling. But I like that your comment too, the difference between driving the drift and then letting the flies go where they will, which we call it, a lot of people will call it, Josh Miller, our coach on the youth team, calls it along for the ride, where you're letting the current drive the fly or carry the flies where it will. Sometimes we'll actually drive the drift so that I get the flies in position so that when I release them to go where they will, they're going to go right to that fish.
So you'll tension up to set up for it.
I'll set up the drift.
Yeah, you're like, there's maybe a second or 2-3 seconds, whatever it is, where you're like, okay, I'm setting it up. And then you're going to, I have my own term for that, but I call it plunging the cider, where I'm like, I drill like a drill bit. I take that cider and go, just like a drill bit, you can't take a really little drill bit and just push like hell and try to drill through steel. Like you can only drill as fast as the material is willing to accept the drill bit. And the cider and the fly sink rate is kind of the same thing. But yeah, you can pull it up tight, get everything straight, and then just drill it in at whatever rate, at whatever moment you want to, plunge it or drill it.
And another really cool influence or manipulation we can do intentionally is that if you've got kind of a spot, either you've pre-spotted a fish, he's there, or he should be there, is to go ahead and track that drift and allow the flies to carry right to that fish. And then a foot before that gets to him, the drift gets to him, is just stop the progress of the rod. Again, we call that inverting or stalling the drift, and it will allow that fly in its normal face first descent in the drift or track in the drift. It will turn that fly head first in the current and rise like a natural emerging insect right in front of it.
It's the same flare we talked about in Trout's Bay.
You're right.
The same exact flare.
We can do it.
Yeah. Fish in the scoop, fish in the scoop where we're bringing it up right in front of them.
It's like Lysen Ring's lift from eons ago.
And you're doing that like, somebody who's trout fished a bit probably knows when they look at a piece of water, okay, like I have A, B, and C, and D water, but within that, there's points or very specific spots. Maybe it's the shadow at the edge of a boulder. Maybe it's one little piece of chop or whatever. And you're saying like during the course of a drift, rather than just throwing a drift and being hopeful, you're going to stall that cider and you're, I don't know the right word for it.
And allow it to invert
your cider and bring that fly up so that it's scooping up right in front of the fish.
There's something about something coming from the bottom of the river going towards the surface that just, I don't know if it pisses them off or makes them hungry.
It imitates natural prey behavior.
Eat that thing.
They eat it. because it's what they're used to seeing. It's
food
what
doesn't.
happens.
99% of the time, food doesn't come from above. It's coming out of the bottom and
Comes the other way, yeah.
Jeremiah was talking about that with carp, about like when he's fishing for carp, if you're pulling a fly towards a carp, they're not going to eat it because they're watching for stuff to come out from under them and flee. They're looking for stuff to flee. I mean, that's what bugs are doing to trout. Even it's fleeing from the substrate coming up.
Natural prey behavior.
Yeah,
that's a term we like to use.
Will you unpack the roll you called the back rolling? Is that the right term?
Yeah, it's a roll jig.
It just like do your best, wish our podcast is a video podcast sometimes, but
it's been a lot of hand movements.
Well, maybe we'll go in this order. And my biggest takeaway was back rolling, like having a specific plan for animation of the fly. But let's go like this. Maybe Nick has a contribution too. Maybe there's something Nick learned today just by listening and watching. Let's go around the room opposite of dealing cards and start with Nick. Nick, did you have a takeaway from today that was where you were like, oh, got it. That little piece, I can apply that and it's going to result in catches.
Just that subtle rod tip movement, right? Watching how everybody else, how much animation, how much movement they put into it, and realizing, just because we're fishing 10-foot 2 weights, not a lot of rod to it, we really don't have to move it that much. And it's definitely made a lot of sense on this type of water.
Less is more.
Less is more, yeah.
Ethan, what about you? At all the stuff you got, it was like drinking from a fire hose today.
Yeah, I obviously hadn't done any of it before, but I'd say the biggest thing was just when Jason Harwood kept telling me, get it tight right away and then find the depth. Because at first I was kind of letting it go slack, and then once it would float down a little bit, then I'd stick in and be tight the rest of the drift, but I was missing out on the first 25% of the drift. If I made it tight right after I flipped it into the run and was, fishing right from the get-go, that's when I started having a lot more success, I think, when I caught that big one with you, because it was just, I could actually feel the fish taking it right. I think I was missing fish, honestly, for the first part of the day.
Getting contact with the fly,
right away.
Yeah. And as you're learning, you probably don't get the correct cast right away. If you cast it properly, your sighter never touches the water.
Yeah.
But when we're learning, we're struggling to learn that, it's short it's relatively short casting, but it's still casting. And there's a nuance to dropping the fly first, being tight to it, and then controlling the descent, which Jason can expound upon. But what you're describing is you were just kind of I'll throw it in the water, I'll get it tight, and then I'll drop it.
Yeah,
right?
Kind of like how with indicator fishing, you would cast it out or something, flip it out, and then start mending.
Yeah. The first 25% is just set up.
Yeah, you're just kind of setting up, and then you start mending and getting it in. You're like, okay, I'm in the zone now. I kind of had that mentality, and then had to drop that.
I'd like to build on that. That's a brilliant observation. And it's just kind of being able to cast correctly so that we end up with that vertical delivery of that fly. And then we follow that fly's descent under tension so that we don't miss those eager fish strikes. A lot of times you'll see a fish that just will grab it before you're really, almost sometimes before you're ready. But if we will take that fly at our feet while it's, you want to make sure you're already tied up to it, because if you drop it, you lose it. But go ahead and drop it and see how fast it sinks. Mm-hmm. That's how fast we should follow the fly's descent under tension so that we don't miss those.
You're talking about dropping a real insect in the water.
No, drop the fly itself in the water and calibrating its descent. Okay, so 1001, 1002, it's on the bottom. That's how fast I should lower the rod following the descent after my cast.
Yeah, so the fly's sinking like this.
Exactly. That's how I want to follow it down, under tension, so that, just as you said, that was a brilliant observation, is that I don't miss those eager fish that are just grabbing that fly a second after it hits the water.
That's why I lose so many flies. I'm just testing the sink rate.
Yeah. I'm not clumsy and
but just make sure you tie them on first. Don't just drop them.
Man, I was so snaggy when I was first doing this.
I still am.
Yeah, you shouldn't. Did we lose any flies on the bottom today?
No.
Just the fish.
Just one on a fish. But, that's another good point is we do not have to plow the bottom with our flies, nor is that effective because fish don't feed looking down. They feed looking forward or looking up.
Yeah.
And so when I'm casting, I try to always follow that fly down. And when my drift begins to slow down, that tells me I'm in the lower column.
That's the downshift.
That's the downshift. And I don't let those flies get any lower unless the depth of the water would change, because I already know I'm tracking the strike zone, because then my drift naturally will move slower than the surface current, cutting through the current. And then I don't have to snag. I don't have to lose that fly to prove to myself that I'm in the strike zone, because I see the downshift and I can just follow it along, and it will be moving slower at that point through the drift than the current that I see from the surface.
I think amongst all of us, 9 people, fishing, I think we might have lost like 2 or 3 flies on the bottom.
And one in a fish.
And one on the fish.
You're not burning a bunch of tackle, losing a bunch of flies.
Oh, I lost tons of flies when I was learning how to do this. Like I was just doing it so wrong.
But as a guide, losing fewer flies in the course of a day has got to be really good for you.
It's money back in my pocket. But Hayden, what was your biggest takeaway?
My biggest takeaway. I was gonna say before I say that, going back to like fishing with your stuff above, like not actually snagging your stuff. You have a video on indicator fishing where you talk about fishing a little bit shallower than where you think the fish are laying. So you get a positive, like the fish has to come up to eat your stuff, right? And then the fish is going to return to its lie, and you get a very positive, I have a fish now. I think like being able to like fish will like you were saying, fish will always come up to eat something that
and then
down.
Then return to the bottom.
Exactly. You get a positive eat every time that they eat it.
So if you're fishing under them, you're not even getting so like, let's just say, for instance, that the trout had to move down to eat your bug. It eats your bug, and then it returns to its position in the water column, which could be
even if it's
6 or 12 inches up. It's now
Yeah.
slacking your line rather than it lifting up, grabbing your fly, and returning to its holding line. Your takes are going to be they're going to feel way more aggressive.
Even if the fly is dead nuts in line, for lack of a better term, right in line with the fish's face, if he eats it, your sighter or indicator, whatever it has to travel past the fish to indicate that you have something, right? Whereas if he comes up to it, he instantly is dunking or pulling or indicating you have a fish on it, like immediately.
Dude, I'd never thought about that, but it's exactly true even in this style of nymphing.
They're moving back to it. It's the same with swinging. That's why I like light tits. The fish comes up and eats it and is turning and going back down,
Home.
and then you're on.
We're going to have Jason explain. Okay, now what was your biggest takeaway? Because there's about 6 things that Jason can explain here in a moment.
Baby.
Biggest takeaway from today was probably, I think, coming from a gear background, twitching for coho. I twitch in a very linear pattern. It's very up and down twitching. I'm actively trying to put slack into the line. You saying to move, you're moving your rod tip in a circle. You're not actually, it's not a linear up and down twitch. It's a circular, very, very subtle, but very circular oval kind of movement of the rod to actually, you keep way more tension in the line. It's way more controlled than just going boing, 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 boing.
That's an excellent point, because when we just drop it, oftentimes we've lost connectivity to it.
Yep.
You've got a lot of slack, then you might miss that strike. And I think also when we just do an up and down motion, we're not changing the orientation of the fly. We're just lifting it up and letting it come back down like this, where it's staying head first, going downstream. Whereas if we do the back roll, we're turning the fly upwards, like it got displaced by a little whiff of current, and then it's going to roll right back down and try to get head first back down to the substrate, down to the bottom where it belongs. And I think that back roll can be a very effective way of imitating that. And I think that's why it was so deadly today. And I think it's a great cold water technique when we have to try to talk those fish into taking a fly where there might be a little bit on the reluctant bite side of things.
Yeah, the back roll and not putting my dang cider in the water blew my mind for that.
Not all the time. So.
It's just so much fun to spend time with such experience and cerebral anglers as what we had on the river today.
There it is again.
So
That's the
much fun.
4th
Might be
use.
something to it, man.
Yeah, I got to coin that term.
4th use that we're going to work that into everything we do. All right. So Jason, or Nick, chime in here anytime, but talk to us about like how important the sink rate, and you have terms for it that I like, but the sink rate of the fly, because like historically, we just we blast a nymph out there. We just let it sink to whatever depth it winds up at, for whether it's under an indicator, a hopper dropper, whatever it is, or even a tightline rig. Like when we're all learning tightline fishing, like unless we're being well coached, like we just kind of flop it out there. It winds up at or near the bottom, and then we start fishing. But talk about how important it is to control the rate of descent.
I think, again, this is just such a rapidly evolving area of our sport, and it's changed so much from what we all were doing even 3 or 4 years ago. And trying in certain water types, obviously, we need a rapid sink rate. We need to just get to the bottom and try to get down there where the trout might be beneath faster current. But I think in medium and slower water, especially the water we were fishing today, sometimes accentuating that descent with a lighter fly, maybe a more fuzzy fly, if you will. Sometimes we're actually brushing these flies up to try to imitate that almost neutrally buoyant insect that isn't much heavier than the water itself. They don't sink that fast. They don't sink like a Perdigon. And so trying to imitate that through leader construction and presentation styles, I think has really opened up different water to us. Because if we use a Perdigon in that type of water, we're just blowing by the fish that might be feeding more vertically in that type of water. And I think once we get to the bottom, we're just going beneath all the willing fish that are not feeding, in the lower 2 inches of the column.
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway, there's so many, was probably understanding that lighter flies, you should be adjusting your fly weight and your style more based on the water you have available to you at wherever you happen to be standing. And there's a lot of water that I walk past that I'm like, well, if I fished a lighter fly, then I could control the descent. Well, I think that was my takeaway. It was like descent control.
Mm-hmm.
I think if I had to just summarize it before I just go on and on, I think descent control, and you can do that through a bunch of different ways, like what Ethan was describing about stopping that rod, not dropping the sighter immediately into the water, but controlling the rate of which the fly sinks so that we can pick up those eager fish that are more potentially more aggressive or just following a natural behavior pattern. But what about what do nymphs really do in the water? Like how are we imitating that, and what are nymphs really doing?
Well, nymphs, they're safe. Their safe point in the river is on the substrate or on the river bottom. And if they get displaced, that's where they want to get back to. They get swept up in the current. They might be carried all the way up to the higher parts of the column by the different current as it flows through, but they really want to get back to the bottom as quickly as possible. Some nymphs are very good swimmers and they can actually actively return. Some of them are not so much, and they're going to try to float and descend back into the lower part of the column and back to the bottom. And I think that's what we're trying to imitate with some of these techniques in those circumstances. We're just trying to match our sink rate to what would be more natural to, if you would, a nearly weightless organism or nearly neutral buoyant, organism.
Yeah, I have undervalued how important it is to control how fast your fly's sinking.
Yeah. Especially in the water we were fishing today. And we were finding fish, you're not going to find fish maybe in that fastest flow when the water temperature is only 39 degrees. You were selecting some really optimal water that would maybe hold those fish under those conditions. And that's where I think sink rate is really important. We just don't want to blow to the bottom necessarily and then get beneath the feeding fish.
Well, this whole day has been like crazy education, and we've got to get you back out here.
Oh, I'd love to. You guys were awesome. Nick and I both.
That was a great day, man.
It was fun just hanging out and laughing and sharing ideas and all of us learning at the same time.
Well, Nick, what have you been fishing lately outside of our powwow on the Yakima the last couple days? Like, Have you been able to fish?
Yeah, outside of fishing today, it's been a busy show season, but I've kind of become a Gulf Coast, Texas coast bum.
Oh,
Fishing the beaches and wearing shorts and no shoes and
There you go.
bumming around the sand and kind of figuring out the salt game. So yeah, I spent a couple weeks around Christmas and New Year's doing that deal.
we're on the Texas coast.
Yep, so kind of the west end of Galveston Island.
Okay. I fished Texas for the first time in December this year.
Yeah, good time, hopefully.
Oh, it was
Decent
awesome.
weather.
Yeah, it was, dude, it was cold.
Okay.
I was there in December.
Well, that's unfortunate. Yeah,
Yeah.
come back down. That's not how it should be.
Well, it was like 80 a couple days before I got
Yeah.
there. And then I got there, we hit a cold front, but we had a great time. So are you fishing mostly redfish or?
A lot of redfish, speckled trout. I've been digging more into the shark game. So one of my
Really?
weird fixations is I want to catch some sharks off the beach, throw on a fly rod. That's, we do it on conventional gear, a little higher success rate there, but it's because we've had so much bait coming close, right? We have a lot of big black tips. People are catching mako sharks out the beach, big hammerheads, 14-foot hammerheads. And you see all these mullet, right, moving through the first gut or even the second gut. Big sharks are following them. So to me, it's like, here's an opportunity to throw a fly at them.
Now, is it true that a mako shark is the fastest fish of the ocean?
As far as I know, everything I've ever seen and ever read and heard from people far smarter than me.
Sounds like they get pretty active.
Again, that's a rarity for the Gulf, but whatever it is, been weather-wise, current-wise, bait-wise, the last couple summers, there's a lot of big sharks cruising. And of course, we have jacks and big black drum and a little bit of everything.
God, that sounds awesome. Is that where you guys, do you take your TFO prototypes down there and just give them the abuse test?
If I'm going to, do some abuse testing and really push them. And again, I stick them on my truck and my rod holders and don't wash them down. And all right, let's see what I can do and how hard we can push these things. And you probably saw how I handled my fly rods today. I think, well, I want to push it to the absolute limit because worst thing I want is someone, buy a fly rod and it fails on them the first time. So I'm going to push this as hard as I can and treat it as poorly and as cringeworthy as, possible.
That's been a heritage, in all honesty, man. Like, that's been a heritage of TFO rods. They've always been very trustworthy. So it's funny to hear you say that because, man, they do have a reputation of like, hey, I need a rod I can count on.
Yeah, and beat up and put in the boat and throw in the truck and do some bad things to it. That's why it hurts my soul when someone calls in or sends me an email. It's like, it broke on the first cast. Something's going on because I abuse the hell out of them. Pardon my language, but good. You got to push them to the limits and understand they're going to be a tool for most people that buy them, right? And want that tool to hold up. And if you're a working guide, right?
Yeah.
You need that tool to last you through a season or a couple seasons.
So what is when you guys go through it, because we fished a prototype today, like when you guys go through prototyping rods, like what are like the stress tests and like how do you guys, what would be an example or like a situation where you would prototype type rods? Like you go through several iterations, you field tested, obviously you're doing a lot of your stuff in Texas, but you're sending them out. We've tested prototypes here at Reds before. Like talk us through that.
Yep, and it depends on the type of rod, the series. Some rods could be 2 or 3 years in the making. Some rods could be 6 months, right? Maybe it's a second or third generation of a series. Like, all right, we just need to tweak 1 or 2 things. Maybe the material gets updated. Maybe we put a little nicer guides, nicer handle, reel seat, something like that on it. Sometimes there's simple fixes or simple evolutions. Other times, Jason and I have spent, I don't know how many years working on different high stick Euro nymph rods. And
sometimes up to 3.
Up to 3 years. And it kind of just depends on the feedback. And, it's tough at times because I want to send you guys more rods and send everybody more rods, right? Because if our retailers and our people using them every day don't necessarily love them or they're like, maybe this would help me to accomplish this task. Sometimes that could get a little tricky, right? To have enough to send around, right? Get enough quality opinions, but
generally decisions by committee are very slow.
Yeah. Yes, and that takes time. And I try to absorb everyone's opinion and feedback and thought. And at a certain point in the project, it's all right. Got to bring this to market, and maybe next time we'll work on this, or if we learn something later. But it's always, at least with TFO, it's got to appeal. I don't want to say the average angler, but the usual angler, right? Maybe they fish only a couple times a year, or they're a guide and they're going to beat the hell out of a tool and they want their customers to go out on a day, float with them and be like, man, this is a really nice rod. I had a great day. You
It's
know,
got to do it all.
they'll catch some fish, which has no bearing on the rod, right? It's the person rowing the boat helping them, but it's got to do it all. It's got to be durable, and they got to, it's a serious expense buying a fly rod, right? That's serious money and something. I want people to be proud of it, right? When they plop that money down at your counter to be, all right.
Did you know that TFO was the very first rod we ever sold at Reds?
I did not.
I
know
did
that, but
not
it makes
either.
me really happy. So I appreciate
Yeah.
that. Thank you.
TFO is the very first rod we ever sold at Reds. We had the original Pro Series, and we had a starter kit called the NXT.
Mhm.
And yeah, those are the very first rods.
That's awesome.
That we
Thank
had
you.
here. Yeah. And your guys' Blitz rod is great. I love the Elevare. The Pro, there will be a YouTube review soon coming out of the Pro Series 3.
Mhm.
Not to turn this podcast into a total sales pitch, but
Yeah.
this is going to happen on the YouTube channel because you weren't even privy to these conversations, but we tested that. You were there, right, Hayden, when we tested that Pro Series 3 this last fall?
Yep.
Yeah, it was like November, I think. And out of all the rods that we cast in that, I think that rod retails at $239. Am I right?
Yeah, $229 to $239. Yes.
There was nothing that was, fast action, multi-use performance, streamers, nymphs, whatever you want to throw on it. In it goes up to 10 weight, if I remember correctly.
There's not a $239 rod on the market.
No, there was nothing that we were ever excited about. Like it was easy for us to say, and not because we wanted to sell somebody over budget. Like, we started to get into that $500, $600, $700 range, and we cast that Pro Series 3, which I had not cast the newest Pro Series at that point. Unanimously, the entire staff was like, that is the best rod for that application. Now you might be able to find a creek rod or something that's not multi-function category. That Pro Series 3 is amazing. And I've got to get a full YouTube breakdown on that and test them, the various weights with some different lines. But that one you guys should be super proud of because there's nothing on the market that compete. In my opinion, there's nothing on the market at that price that competes with it.
Well, thank you. I think we're incredibly proud of that, and kind of touches back on what you said earlier, is making this a little bit easier for most people, right? Making the whole process easier. They can get some good feedback from the rod. They can fish various techniques and like fishing pressured waters, right? Let's make this easier for most anglers and not make it harder and throw in a bunch of technology and other things that don't really apply, right? Does it really help you? Does it improve your success?
Well, I think what improves people's success is when they have they have the right tool for the job. So if you want to get into tightline nymphing, well, there's a rod, right? You want a creek fishing rod, there's a rod. You want a good sink tip rod, well, that's probably a different rod, et cetera. So, people it's like a good set of wrenches. Like, you can have a really great 1/2-inch wrench, but it's not going to do everything.
And if you only have a couple Saturdays, right? Find something that's going to work, that you enjoy casting, that you'd be proud of, and then afford to go out and use the thing, right?
Well, you guys should be super proud of, what you built there. Did you work with Lefty Cray?
I did. In my early days, I spent a lot of time on the road with him and used to book flights and hotels for him. And it's a weird thing. I don't know whatever happened, but any picture I ever have with him, we're sitting at a dinner table or we're sitting at a show, and he's always telling just some ridiculous story, traveling in the Amazon, and they're, bathroom type stories, but it's always just that he's telling some funny story. He's got a big grin on his face. But yeah, I was lucky enough to handle a lot of his travel and spend a lot of time with him. So he was a character.
I got to meet him. I got to meet him once at the Pacific Northwest Fly Fishing Expo in Portland, Oregon, about it's been at least 15 years ago. And watching him do a seminar on distance casting was just, it was exceptional. I'm sure I picked off bits and pieces of what he talked about in there. I'm probably plagiarizing a lot of his verbiage that he used that I don't realize I'm doing, but that was really an exceptional experience to have. The other thing I did is I got his book, and I'm a huge advocate for books. I can't wait to get a copy of yours. I'm going to expect a signed copy though, just so you know, Nick. His book on saltwater fly fishing. To this day, I bought his book, Saltwater Fly Fishing. I got a used copy on eBay or something like that. It was like $20. It was, they're probably a lot more now, but his book on saltwater fly fishing was super good because there was no sales pitch. He's not trying to sell you anything. He's not trying to get a click, like, comment, or follow. And And so his book on saltwater fly fishing to this day is like an absolutely exceptional publication. So like if anybody's listening to this, like about saltwater fly fishing, go get Lefty's book, because that guy, the way he spells things out, like just in the written word with a few good pictures, like old school information that was all vetted over decades of saltwater fly fishing. Not like, oh, I got into the industry and now I want to be influential. Like, give me a give me a smartphone and a Wi-Fi connection. All of a sudden I'm God's gift to fly fishing. But like his book was super good. Like I loaned it out to somebody. One of my staff
Get that back. Yeah.
I know one of my staff members has it, at this point, because I've, all of our travel hosts, before they go host any international, saltwater travel, I would give them that book and I would say, like, if you want to do this, if you're going to like get into saltwater fishing, you got to read this book, because these are facts. These aren't opinions. They're not sales pitches. It's no propaganda. Like, these are facts. But yeah, I'm sure his, legacy still lives on,
Oh, absolutely.
It lives on through each of us.
Mhm.
All of us, all the people that he influenced, and we get a chance to influence others. That's his legacy.
And the facts are there, right? I mean, he broke it down, and his upbringing and how he approached the sport was it's refreshing now, right? Everyone wants to get highly technical. You can only do this. You can only do that. No, right? He just kind of found a working person's way around it. And right, this type of casting angle, rod tip angle, all these little things, right? Tying flies, how he approached fisheries. Was always, is a refreshing approach. And again, how many years of doing it and figuring things out, and not having a technical background or an engineering background or any of those things that kind of give you a false sense of
He did his
superiority.
He did his postgraduate education.
I mean, yeah,
on the flats.
Yeah, right. I mean, you figured it out and learned it. And I think that's a good message or a point to anybody, right? You can figure this out if you just spend a little time. You don't have to have an advanced degree, right? Your advanced degree will be on the water, and figure out what works for you and how to be the most efficient.
Yeah, there is no piece of gear or rod or line or fly or anything that is a replacement for just time on the water.
Yeah,
there's no piece of gear you can go out and buy.
There's a podcast you can listen to.
Guess
the
what?
Mend Fly Fishing Podcast.
There's a great podcast.
The secret to success is you listen to the podcast and then you go out to the river and you apply it.
Yep.
You have to go to the river
You learn it and figure it out. And one of our other former national advisors at TFO, Flip Hallett, used to say, you can't walk up to a rod rack and buy the skills. And that's, usually an end around or a cut through for a lot of people, a shortcut. Can't just walk up and buy the skills, right? You have to spend the time. We talked about that earlier. Why are guides, why are people on certain rivers so successful? Because they commit to it. They spend all year, multiple years on it, different water flows. Jason, you said maybe a cloud will come over, right? A lot of different variables, and that's how people become successful. And that's not always the easiest, right? If you're an occasional angler, but when you want to look at somebody and understand why they're so productive and efficient on water, there's that commitment factor.
Yeah, nice gear sure as hell helps, but taking the time to learn how to use the gear that you invest.
Go take a casting lesson, spend some money at a shop. Well, I won't name anyone specifically, but Red's probably someone local here that can help you take some casting lessons, right? And build those skills and understand how to bend a rod, how to load and unload a rod.
Well, that Lefty Cray was one cerebral angler. There it is again. Well, I think we'll wrap it up with that, guys. It's been a pleasure, and I hope maybe it'll occur over another trade show in the Pacific Northwest. But we look forward to getting you guys here again. So
thank you very much. It was a great day.
You bet. Any concluders, Hayden?
I still like swinging flies a whole lot, but the tightline thing is cool.
Well, I'm glad we're winning you over one trout at a time.
Yeah.
Come over to the dark side.